In this session on Thinking with Resilience, I want to focus on whether or not when things go wrong, when we have setbacks, whether we tend to focus on the problem or the solution. I don't know whether you've noticed, but when we are under a lot of pressure, when things go wrong, what we tend to do is we tend to be more likely to catastrophize, and we tend to focus more on the problem and how bad it is and the actual impact that it's having on us. And the more pressure we're under, the more this seems to be the reaction. What we do know about resilient people is that they very quickly move from a focus on the problem to a focus on the solution. And of course, this is very easy to say, but very hard to do. So what are some of the things that you could do in order to shift this focus from problem to solution? Well, once you've had your immediate sort of, oh my goodness, sort of moment, the first step really is to say, okay, given this has gone wrong, what do I still have an influence over? So for example, if you've been told that your role's going to change and you're not very happy about that, but it's non-negotiable, then getting upset about that isn't much use. So getting upset about things that are outside of your control is not really useful. So if the role is going to change but you have input into making that role work for you, then clearly the piece of focus that you need to make is, how do I actually make this role work for me? So some useful things to think about whenever things go wrong is, first of all, what's in my control, but then secondly, to immediately focus on questions to yourself that lead to a solution rather than the problem. What's one thing I can do in this situation? What's one small step I can make that's going to make a big difference? What would it look like if this was sorted out? How have I experienced this situation in the past, and how might I bring some of those strategies or experiences to the current situation? All of those questions are really useful because what they get us to do is to focus on what it would look like if we resolved the situation rather than how awful it is in the current situation. And resilient people do this individually, but it's also a really useful strategy when you're working in teams. And so if the team's having a particular issue, if the team's in trouble, has low morale, spending time looking at why we so dissatisfied can mean you could spend hours and hours just dwelling on the, what I call, isn't it awful conversation. Going quite quickly from acknowledging people's feelings into what do we do about it is a very much more effective way to deal with it. So again, what would it look like if we were back on track again? What would the team look like if it was functioning? Those questions which actually get us to reflect on the outcome of things being good rather than the reasons why we're in the current situation are all really useful. And what you find is that in these situations when we have setbacks, one of the few things we can control is what we focus on. And what we focus on ends up being what we spend our energy on. So if we're focusing on what we can do rather than what's gone wrong, then straight away our energy goes into actually looking at how we might resolve the problem rather than how we might worry and talk about how bad it is that we're in this situation to begin with. And what you'll find is not only will that actually energize you and make you feel better, but in a team scenario, conversations are far shorter when you actually ask the right questions and when you focus on what will it look like rather than what does it look like. And resilient people use those strategies all the time. Try it yourself and see how it works for you.